um, one of the first 5 salespeople hired by Physio Control.
Okay.
And so we sold the first portable defibrillators.
Was that
And
4?
no,
4 or the one before that?
no. It was LifePak 33.
Oh God, yeah. Okay, I remember that brick. Yeah.
Yeah, that LifePak 33, and that was the first one we had. Had a real tiny little scope on it. First people to ever use them was at the University of Virginia, UVA, and they had to run with a dock.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was before. That was before even, I think, Seattle. Seattle was the test bed for physio and for DC defibrillation.
Yeah, with Mickey and with Mike Kobus and Mickey, whatever the hell his name was. Yeah.
Well, they started so it was they had AC defibrillation. DC defibrillation didn't happen until it would have been the very they started experimenting with it in the late 60s. Dr. Lown and Dr. Edmark was Dr. Edmark, and they started that DC defibrillation. Everything was AC before then. As a matter of fact, when I was going around to the hospitals, most people still had AC defibrillators. They shocked themselves more than they shocked the patient.
Yeah. That was always an interesting event, man.
Yeah, so I got started. The only reason I got started was because the money that was coming back from Vietnam to start what became EMS. The guys were buying new equipment, new ambulances, new this, new that, and defibrillation wasn't standard protocol.
Yeah.
And so I figured if I was going to be successful, I'd have to learn. So I became an ACLS trainer. I was the first non-physician certified in ACLS.
Did you have, I'll share an interesting story with you. I did a bunch of work down at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia with Dee Hodge, who ended up in St. Louis running pediatric emergency medicine up there. And I got wind of an ACLS instructor course at Women's College of Pennsylvania down in Philadelphia. So I thought, oh, this is cool. I'll become an ACLS instructor. So I walk in and I'm sitting next to Dee Hodge, and he said, well, what do you do? I said, I'm a paramedic. He said, what the hell are you doing here? I said, I want to become an ACLS instructor. He said, no. This is a closed club here in Philadelphia. If you're not a physician, they're not going to let you be an ACLS instructor. So I said, okay. So they beat the crap out of me and I left. And a month later, I went up to Lehigh Valley Hospital Center and went through a course with George Markirk and became an ACLS instructor.
When did you become a paramedic? Because in the early 70s, there was no such designator.
I know, 79. I became a medic.
Yeah.
I had started this stuff when I was 14. And when EMS sort of came out of the dark ages in 70,
yeah,
I had become an instructor for the AHA Advanced First Aid and Emergency Care course, or the ARC rather, Advanced First
Aid. Yeah, Red Cross. And
the guys from Pennsylvania came around from the EMS Bureau in Harrisburg, which was just the old Civil Defense Office.
Sure.
They said, okay, how many of you guys have taken the White Book course? And you held up your hand. Christy's already heard this story. You held up your hand and they hand you some paperwork and they say, oh, okay, fill this out. You're now an EMT. How many of your instructors?
They didn't have, yeah, EMT again. EMT came about mid 70s. They didn't have, at that time it was basic first aid, and they didn't have any official titles. And they worked on that book that created the EMT.
Yep.
I think Susan McHenry was one of the involved. And see, Susan had just started working with EMS as the director for the state of Virginia. As a matter of fact, Susan and I go back a really long ways. She just had started in the business back then. And
she was a buddy of Bob Leach's.
Yeah, she was. There was a lot of people that were you know, if you go back far enough, I mean, you run into everybody. I mean, I took the course in the second course that was done for ACLS. First one was done in Fishersville, Virginia, and Hap Arnold out of Georgetown was the instructor.
Yeah.
And then I took the second course, which was at back in Blacksburg, and I was the only. I was not only the only non-physician, I think I was the only non-cardiologist in the room.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
it was a very closed fraternity in the beginning, man.
yeah. Well, but they gave me a certificate. I actually came out of the course as an instructor.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of interesting where I was when I went back up to Lehigh Valley Hospital Center and to Sacred Heart Hospital in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
I didn't get quite so much heat as I got in Philadelphia because I served on the board of one of the hospitals in the area. So they were kind of a little more deferential to me.
Well, that's good. But I tell you, it was really hard, though, to try to be an instructor when you had nothing but docs.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of like the orphan child. Anytime a doc was giving me too much slack, one of the other instructors came over and kind of intervened.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you know, I've got the distinction, you know, a lot of salespeople have been thrown out of an account and some of them have been thrown out of a hospital.
Yeah.
But I got thrown out of an entire county. So
now there's a unique distinction for you, buddy.
I tell you, and anyway, there's a lot of stories, a lot of stories in the Naked City.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I got started really early. I was, you know, I think as soon as EMT became EMT, I became an EMT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We went through the transition in '73.
I think that's about. I think I actually became an EMT in Richmond. Actually, I took the class in Virginia Beach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took the class down at Station 10. Bruce Edwards was the director.
Well, you know what drove a lot of it was when Nixon finally signed the Emergency Medical Services Systems Act in '73. There was finally money.
Yeah, that's
once
exactly
the money started to roll out, the states got off their butts and developed programs.
Yeah, they got it. That's exactly what happened. Is when the money started coming up, that's when it really became real. And yeah, I was there. I was, you know, we're active there. And then by the time I made it up to Maryland, because I covered half of North Carolina and Virginia, but when I got moved up to Maryland, I ran into Lou.
Man, I'll tell you, between oxygen and the MRL and a drug box over your shoulder, by the time you got to the third floor on a call, you were ready to be treated as
yeah, they were pretty well. The LifePak 4, which came out, was actually the second LifePak to come out. It weighed about 34 pounds.
Yeah,
and that,
they were,
and that was considered lightweight. The MR, I think most of them were around 40, 45 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure what I don't remember what the MRL weighed, but it was a hell of a chunk.
It was, I think it was, I want to say it was 39 or between 39 and 42 pounds. It was heavier than us. We had ours was considered lightweight, and you developed pretty good forearms carrying it. But you know, most of them were pretty heavy. I think really the first one that came out that kind of, you know, was going towards the smaller version of it was, you know, Datascope had the removable monitor. That was and they had the first non-bouncing ball monitor, first continuous trace monitor. And then the first one that had a paper capacitor was the Pantridge out of Ireland. And then the LifePak 5 came out right after that.
Yep.
And then they went back and made the LifePak 2 and the LifePak 1. I may have an old Physio Doppler.
Oh, really?
Yeah, had a little pen. They had a pen that was actually a Doppler.
Yeah.
You put it on a stethoscope. Yeah. I don't think I have any equipment. Obviously, I had to turn all that stuff back in. But you know, I may have. The only thing I can remember I have that for sure is I have the awards that I won as a sales guy. Well, and but actual equipment, you know, I could have told you, you know, where you could have got everything at one time, but you know, most of the hospitals have been torn down,
Yeah,
and been rebuilt. And usually when they tore stuff down, they got rid of all the old
yeah,
equipment, because I knew where there were some 911s, some 1440s. There were some old, they had actually a system that would monitor, like Central Station Monitor.
yep.
So they had a whole bunch of old things that, you know, were around. And but I couldn't tell you where you could put your hands on something right now. I might have a Doppler. If I can find the Doppler, I'm happy to give it to you.
Well, I think what we will probably want to do down the road, once we can get access to everything, and we're probably going to let you get a look at some of the stuff that we've got. A lot of it we pulled out of Lou's place.
Yeah.
And for equipment that we're not familiar with, you may well be familiar with it, that if we're not.
Yeah, Lou had some pretty interesting things. He had a couple of the old GE radio, you know, there were kind of radios. They weren't radios, but they were the first acoustic couplers, so they could send EKGs. Yep. And so he had a couple of the old radios that I identified for him. And there was a couple of other accessory items that would have gone to different pieces of equipment. God, if I could find, you know, if I can find, and I don't know that I can, I had some old VHS tapes. I did the first interview in North Carolina with, trying to think of the doc that was down there, Steve Asai. And before they had gotten EMS in North Carolina, we did a demonstration on television on one of the morning shows, showing how they could do EKGs over you know, wirelessly to the ER, and everybody, you know, was all excited about it. And the EMS director at the time, I don't know if it was Steve, it might have been before Steve, said to me, he said, "Well, Pete, this is great." He said, "It'll be about 10 years." He says, "I don't have people that can read the books, so I can't give them this stuff." And yeah, it was a real big delay down in North Carolina. They were kind of behind because they, you know, I think Steve came in and he really turned it around and got everybody up to stuff. But there were times when I actually was in North Carolina and I was the only person that had equipment, and it was in my car. The ambulances didn't have anything in them.
Yeah. When I was chief of a squad up in Pennsylvania and running with 2 medic units, the trunk of my car looked like an ALS unit.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was my fear, was I would be pulling into a hospital, wheel in all these defibrillators, and I would have a heart attack and nobody would know how to use them. That was always a general fear of mine. And certainly so that as long as I'm breathing, I'll let you know what I know. And if I find anything, if I come across anything, as a matter of fact, I know some of the people, there's only like 2 people of the original crew left at Physio Control that actually know who I am. And if I can call them and see if they've got, you know, stuff that they're getting ready to get rid of, if they haven't already gotten rid of.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your time situation tonight, Pete?
I have to go, actually, probably, what time is it? 6:20. I actually have to be somewhere at 7 o'clock, and it's a 10-minute, 15-minute run. So I'd like to be off in the next 10 minutes or so.
Oh, Doc, did you have another question or two? And we'll get another story out of Pete here before he has to take off.
Yeah, well, Doc knows pretty much my whole story. We've known each other since we've known each other, which I think is probably 20 plus, maybe 30 years.
Well, let me see. The first SOMA conference was 92, and you and I were at the one in 93. So that's how long we've known each other.
Yeah, so 93. Yeah, it'd be almost 30 years.
Yep. Scary, isn't it? All right. When do you want to, Christy, what do you want to do? Just start and we'll go? Or do you want to wait at the half hour and we'll just do?
No, just if you have another couple of question or two. I think the physio info that we got was great. I'll just record it and then I'll do all the editing tonight and I'll post it a little bit later than what we had planned on broadcasting.
All right, let me, hearing aid is yelling at me. Wait a minute. There. All right, let me go back to the beginning, Pete, and let's start this sort of from scratch.
Okay.
You said earlier you first initially got involved in EMS in about 1974. And that
Yeah,
was
74, 75.
okay.
time
And that
frame,
was
and that was-
driven by your involvement with Physio Control.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
tell me what you were doing in those days.
Well, I started in 73. I went to work for a pharmaceutical company called Syntex in 73. And Syntex was the first, their claim to fame is, well, actually, they were probably the most significant pharmaceutical company since the advent of penicillin. These were the guys that invented the birth control pill, changed us forever. And so I was in that in the pharmaceutical business and went from Syntex to Cooper Laboratories out of New Jersey. And nobody knows these names anymore. Syntex got bought by Huffman LaRoche. Cooper, nobody knows them. They were part of the Gillette family. It wasn't the proper Gillette family, but one of the cousins. Mm-hmm. And they're the people that did Aveeno and Oral-B and a lot of the brand names that today. They also did pharmaceuticals, and they sold all those products off. The one that got away was we had a product called Somnifac, and couldn't give it away, couldn't sell it, couldn't. I mean, it was unbelievable. Couldn't do anything with it. We sold it off to McNeil. They changed the name to Quaaludes, and the rest is history. And, yeah. So.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So. And then I got an offer. I got a call from a friend. I was the youngest pharmaceutical rep ever hired by any company, and I was also non-physician. I was the first non-physician. I was an experiment, and with Syntex, and then I got a call. The pharmaceutical industry kind of went weird because it was all pharmacists. They were all guys. So they got sued when the Office of Economic Opportunity became real. And so they just fired everybody. They wholesale fired a ton of people. And so the pharmaceutical industry was in turmoil. And just before that exploded, I got a call from Physio Control and interviewed in North Carolina and was hired. So that's how I got started in the medical equipment business. So around that time, then they moved me to Richmond, Virginia to handle the Virginia/half North Carolina territory. And it just didn't make sense for me to be in that business and not understand, how to use it, how to be there, how to actually to do that. And that's when I got involved with the Heart Association. I was actually on the board for the Heart Association in the middle region, I guess the Mid-Atlantic region. And so again, Ken, I'm trying to think of Ken's last name. Anyway, I was, like I said, I was the first, to my knowledge, I was the first non-physician certified in ACLS. So, and I was with Physio until 1980, 81, but in 79, my mentor and the president of Physio Control, Hunter Simpson, kind of intimated to me that I needed to look at a career change because he felt that the position that I probably should be looking at was his, and he wasn't giving it up. So he helped me. He suggested. And he helped me, by the way. He sent me to some programs, for management and stuff like that. And as a result, started Marketing Assessment in 1979, and we've been in business ever since.
And Marketing Assessment, because you and I have bumped into each other at a lot of conferences, but I never really understood exactly what you did except representing a bunch of products. What does Marketing Assessment do?
So marketing assessment actually started, it started between myself and Len Benyak. And Len Benyak's another name you know. And Len Benyak was the Motorola guy in Pennsylvania. He's the one that set up all the Motorola radios for initially for EMS. And his father-in-law sold ambulances. And so we kept running into each other. And we ended up basically living out of the back of his ambulances, going to calls, and we were about the same size, so we didn't have to carry much because we'd switch jackets and things like that. And that's how we got started. So we decided together. I was still working for Physio, and he was working for Motorola, his father-in-law. And we one day said we should do this as a company, and we started the company together. And that's what happened. So we basically started selling Impact. We started selling aspirators, and back in the day. And so then we were selling. We started saying, well, if we're going to sell.
Hey, you went a little fast. No, wait a minute. Slow down a minute. Impact was a suction brake that was on the street. Just so everybody knows.
Yeah,
they may not know.
Well, it was the first ones that came out were the little pumps, the little used hand syringes, and then they came out with a foot pump operation. It was Laerdal, Laerdal had the suction units.
Yep.
And Impact was the first domestic manufacturer of aspirators, and they actually did a really good job, and the military. So there's a transition right there. So what happened was we figured, well, we're selling the equipment we're selling the ambulance. So now we're selling the equipment that goes in the ambulance. And then we said, well, we should actually start building stuff. So we started building the little rescue trucks like you saw on Emergency, so we started selling those. And we hooked up with a company out of Georgia. And so that started that business, and we went from ambulances, rescue trucks, ambulances, and then from the ambulance business, because a lot of those people were doing multiple things. So a lot of the ambulance companies were in the transportation business. So then we started building using modular design. We started doing minibuses. We sold minibuses. If you sell minibuses, then you got to sell limousines. So we started becoming entrepreneurial, and we started expanding. So the companies, it's really interesting. I mean, we could talk forever, but the only reason marketing assessment existed is we needed a name that had the initials MAI. And the reason was, in those days, people actually answered their phones, and we wanted to say, "May I help you?" Using the initials.
Very cool.
Yeah. And so when we got into the vehicle business, the company's name was Anybody Fabricators, spelled N-E-A-N-E Body Fabricators. And that was because we could build any body. And so it got to be a joke in the field, but we sold a bunch of vehicles and things. And then that all became Omni Emergency Vehicles and Omni Medical, and we changed we became more official in those days. But we had a lot of distributors in those days too, meaning there were a lot of guys just like us that were in the EMS field, and it was usually working out of a storefront, and they were in these obscure locations, and they covered like the whole state. And there was you really had to know where these people were if you were going to go find them. And It usually was an old gas station with a couple ambulances parked out front, and splints and things sitting in the showroom window. So not us, but that's how most of them looked in those days.
What was Len's father-in-law's ambulance company name in those days?
Well, he owned, it's still in business, Conway Coach.
Okay.
Conway Coach.
I know who they are.
Yeah. So Dick Conway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So
I started in Pennsylvania, so I was curious to find out which manufacturer it was.
Well, he did all the hearses. He's still I think one of the largest hearse distributors in the country.
Yeah, and I think that's how a lot of the guys that built ambulances in the early days got started, was they were in the hearse business.
Exactly right.
You know,
I
except for
think,
Schwab, they were in the carriage business out in Lancaster County.
I believe that, and the first company that did that was out of Arkansas. Armbruster Stageway had they had the patent on the stretch vehicle.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I never knew
they
that.
actually had the, huh?
Never knew that one. There's a piece of trivia.
Well, if we had trivia for this kind of stuff, I might be okay in it. My rest of my brain is on hold. But yeah, but that kind of stuff. So Armbruster Stageway, which is the remnants of that company, is called Federal now. When you see something that says Federal, that's the old Armbruster Stageway. And so we got involved through that business into the government, to the DoD, into the military.
Yeah.
And that happened because I got a call from AID. Guy's name was Al Kanye. Can't forget this guy's name. He's probably been dead, I don't know, forever. And Al came up and he wanted to buy. He wanted us to sell him, I want to say like 15 LifePak, like LifePak 4s or something. And I said, why are you only buying 15? He said, we're going to another. Well, it turned out he was buying hundreds of data scopes, MRLs, and stuff like that. We could never figure out how our competition stayed business, because we had 85% of the market. And I found out it was the federal government, because they were sending them overseas, and they were buying. And the only reason they were buying them is because they had these distributors that were locked into Congress. They had these guys up in New York, and So I'm the guy that kind of started the government group at Physio Control, and it was through that. And once I got started doing that, me, I can't leave anything alone. So I started knocking on all the doors. I figured out who did what to whom, and then the guys that left Physio, which started a lot of your companies that are out there now. What was the pulse oximeter company original? Those guys came out of Physio. Heartstream came out of Physio. There's like 4 or 5 guys that came out of Physio, and they called me and said, Pete, why don't you help us with the government? So we became the government consulting group, and that's how I got over to the federal government. And we became kind of a gap company. We looked at technology that could be used in far forward applications, and we did a lot of the vetting on it. And over time, are you familiar with what PMI, patient movement items? Are you familiar with those?
Sure.
Well, there were 7 PMI items, and we represented 5 of the 7.
Not bad.
So we had all the aiders. We had the monitors, defibrillators, ventilators, and aspirators. Yeah, and we also So anytime there was a situation where they couldn't come up with their own solution other than reinvent the wheel, we got involved and helped them identify and vet the appropriate equipment that was used, that became standard equipment or standard care over time. So we did one of the Louisiana maneuvers down at Fort Gordon, and it was the first time we had demonstrated they had seen telemedicine, and that was in '85. And the system that we introduced in '85 is still more sophisticated than anything that's out there today.
Yeah.
We worked on a project called Zeus, which is now called the Da Vinci robot. We had a project called Eyeglass, which is now Google Earth. So we've been involved in the infancy LED lighting that came out of NASA. That was something that we were involved with and introducing it to the government, into the medical space in the government. Yep. So a lot of the technology, the government creates or pays for, and then they kind of lose it. And so what we try to do is find out where they had spent their money and help reintroduce it so they don't have to pay for it twice.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
So that's what marketing assessment does. We we help people, products, ideas, and things. You know, anything that we can do to improve the soldier, the ability to get returned to duty or get home or survive. You know, we've been involved. We introduced hemostatic dressings. We were the quick clot people.
Yep.
We helped them bring it in. I can tell you, I mean, there's a ton of stuff that we've been involved with over time, and currently we're involved with some pretty exciting stuff too.
Yeah. Do you ever work with Hartwell, the vacuum splint guys?
I've met those guys a couple times. We've talked, and they do some interesting things.
Yeah.
But it's like one of these other things. I don't want to get, there's like 4 or 5 competitors, and they all kind of are. They're not unique enough to separate them to say, okay, this is definitive. This is how you have to do it. One of the areas that we introduced was the real splint, right? And EMS adopted it in some cities, but most of them are still buying stuff that, and we've got all the studies, we've got all the stuff. Now the DOD, they got 150,000 of them plus, and that's what they use. That's the standard of care.
Yeah.
So, and the reason they only have 150,000 is unlike a certain other splint that they used to buy, which they had to buy 50,000 a month for replacement. The real splints don't break. That's the difference.
Yeah. Interesting observation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of fun sometimes to listen to government folks justify why they stick with a product and aren't willing to switch. That's always a fascinating discussion.
Well, that's a simple answer though. It's because.
Yeah.
It's a because. Anyway, so I'm going to have to fly, but I really appreciate this, and you guys can call me anytime. We don't have to make it an official thing, and I still travel a little bit, and we still are within driving distance if you're in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Where do you live in now, Pete?
I live in Arlington. As a matter of fact, if it wasn't dark, I would show you out the right window that I'm sitting next to, and you'd see the Pentagon.
Okay. Very cool. All right, man. Thanks for the time, Pete. Enjoy wherever you're going next.
Yeah, well,
we'll be talking to you again.
No problem. Look forward to it.
Thanks,
Take
Pete.
care. Bye-bye.
So long. Okay, folks, that wraps it up. A little shorter than we had planned, but there you have it. And we'll be talking to Pete Chambers some more about some of our artifacts, because he has a wealth of knowledge on products and equipment as EMS has emerged, and then segued over into military medicine shortly before I first met him. So he'll be a good resource for us. Christy, over to you.
I think that is about, pushing too many buttons here. I think that's about it for us. We hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. If you are able, we would love for you all to join the National EMS Museum as members, and you can do that at emsmuseum.org/support. And we have some challenge coins ready to go in the mail, so clear me out as soon as you can by joining today. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you online soon.
Great. Good night, everybody.